Good evening, friends, and welcome back to the second masterclass on future and options trading. दोस्तों ये blinkX masterclass session बहुत ही informative और interactive होने वाला है. And for this, I'm glad to introduce our today's masterclass speaker, Miss Soni Patnaik, Assistant Vice President in Equity Broking Group of JM Financial Services. She is having nearly 10 years of experience in equity market, skilled in derivative analysis, and developing and implementing trading strategies. Today, she will tell us about futures and option jargons. और सेशन के एंड में आप अपने क्वेश्चन कमेंट बॉक्स में पूछ सकते हैं. तो दोस्तों हो जाइए तैयार मार्केट और ऑप्शन ट्रेडिंग से जुड़ी ढेर सारी जानकारी के लिए. वेलकम सोनी एंड ओवर टू यू.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. Namaste sabko, and welcome to our Options Masterclass session. So, आज के session में we'll cover mostly on the futures and options में जो daily basis में we use a lot of jargons, right? So, sometimes we use at CEP, understanding what is option, what is PCR, what is IV. Usually it can confuse डे टू डे बेसिस में हम जैसे एनालिस्ट हम यूज करते हैं, बट परहैप्स सबको ये पता नहीं होता है उसका मीनिंग क्या है, इम्प्लीकेशन क्या होता है. सो आज के इस वेबिनार में हमने एकदम ही वी केप्ट इट सिंपल and we'll try to understand in a very basic and simple language what are these jargons and understanding which will help us in the future webinars जानने के लिए उसको कैसे हम क्यों यूज करते हैं, उसका इंपॉर्टेंस क्या रहेगा, रेलेवेंस क्या रहेगा. राइट, सो लेट अस मूव ऑन. So today first slide we'll cover understanding what is the options. So option price क्या होता है, strike price क्या होता है. So I think last हमारे webinar में we have already introduced कि options दो तरीके के होते हैं. One is your call option, one is your put option. Right. So but what is that option price that we all keep on talking about? So ideally जब भी आपको option you have to buy something, you pay a price to buy that. Right, so that price is what we call as your option price. हमारे jargons में हम उसको option premium बुलाते हैं. मान लीजिए कि I have to buy something, I will buy, I'll give it to you, right? So I am the option buyer. आप मुझसे ले रहे हैं वो premium, so you become the option seller. So that is what we call as option price or option premium. Usually we associate it as premiums for both type of options. It can be call options, it can be put options also. Now understanding कि हर एक ऑप्शंस में बहुत बहुत डिफरेंट स्ट्राइक प्राइसेस होते हैं. फॉर एग्जांपल जैसे कि मान लीजिए कि रिलायंस अगर आज 2500 में चल रहा है, 2500 फॉर एग्जांपल, तो आई कैन से कि रिलायंस हम कौन सा कहाँ में देखूं कि ऑप्शन प्राइस क्या है, प्रीमियम क्या है, व्हाट इज दैट, हाउ डू आई आइडेंटिफाई इट. So there are different strike prices. These are known as your predetermined level prices. जहाँ पे एक specific derivative contract आप buy कर सकते हैं, बेच सकते हैं. So these are known as the strike prices. If I say, for example, Reliance is currently quoting at 2500, so Reliance का 2400 पे और strike price होगा, 2600 पे होगा, 2420 भी हो सकता है, 2440 भी हो सकता है, depend करता है. It differs from stocks to stock. It differs from contract to contract. हर एक स्ट्राइक का आपको कॉल ऑप्शन भी दिखेगा और हर एक स्ट्राइक के आपको पुट ऑप्शंस भी दिखेंगे. And both your put and your call options will have that price, that premium that we are talking about. जिसमें आप या तो buy भी कर सकते हैं, आप sell भी कर सकते हैं, depending on the kind of action that we're taking. So these are the very two important jargons that we use on a daily basis. Your strike price. The importance of this is कि जैसे आप किसी भी options में trade करते हैं, you would understand कि उसमें आपको कौन सा strike choose करना चाहिए, क्यों choose करना चाहिए, वही strike उसका कितना प्रीमियम लग रहा है आपको बाय करने के लिए या बेचने के लिए. So that is very important to understand. Of course, वो थोड़ा डिटेल में हम जानेंगे when we understand more about what exactly is options, price क्या होता है, क्या क्या पैरामीटर्स इम्पैक्ट करते हैं on a daily basis for these prices की फ्लक्चुएट होता है, ऊपर नीचे प्राइसेस हो सकते हैं. राइट, सो आई थिंक वेरी बेसिक अंडरस्टैंडिंग हम आपको दे सकते हैं. ऑप्शंस जो होता है उसमें सेम एक्सपायरी डेट होता है जो कि फ्यूचर्स में भी होता है. फ्यूचर्स का जो लॉट साइज होता है, ऑप्शंस आल्सो हैव द सेम लॉट साइजेस. We have already covered in the last previous webinar that there are two types of options. One is a call option, one is a put option. अगर आप बुलिश है स्टॉक में या मार्केट में तो आप बाय कर सकते हैं कॉल ऑप्शन. या तो फिर आप सेल कर सकते हैं पुट ऑप्शन, दैट इज ऑल्सो काइंड ऑफ बुलिश सिग्नल। अगर आप मंदी का ओपिनियन लेते हैं फॉर अ स्टॉक और इन मार्केट, तो आप या तो सेल कर सकते हैं एक कॉल ऑप्शन, और एल्स यू कैन बाय अ पुट ऑप्शन। बाइंग और सेलिंग के बीच में जो डिफरेंस था, दैट वी हैव कवर्ड लास्ट वेबिनार। ऑफ कोर्स वी जस्ट क्विकली टू गिव यू दैट रिकैप। बाई जब आप करते हैं तो आप ऑप्शन प्रीमियम पे करते हैं टू द सेलर, जो सेलर होता है वो ऑप्शन प्रीमियम लेते हैं आपसे। तो बाइंग में आप जितना भी प्रीमियम आप दे रहे हैं बाई करने के लिए, उतना ही आपका लिमिटेड रिस्क रहता है, और जो भी उसके ऊपर जाता है दैट बिकम्स योर प्रॉफिट। बट जो सेलर्स रहते हैं ऑफ द ऑप्शन प्रीमियम, जो हमसे प्रीमियम कलेक्ट करते हैं, उनके लिए अनलिमिटेड रिस्क हो जाता है, बिकॉज उनके लिए प्रॉफिट सिर्फ उतना ही प्रीमियम, जब तक पूरा वो प्रीमियम जीरो नहीं बन जाता है, उनके लिए उतना ही प्रॉफिट रहता है या फिर रिवॉर्ड रहता है। रिस्क उनके लिए एकदम ही अनलिमिटेड रहता है। So these are very basic recap that I've given you. Let us understand from the next slide कि ऑप्शन ये जो प्राइस होता है प्रीमियम, उसको इम्पैक्ट क्या क्या पैरामीटर्स कर सकते हैं। यू नो ऑन अ डेली बेसिस वी सी प्राइसेस मूविंग अप एंड डाउन. So let us understand at a very simple and broad base what are the factors affecting option pricing. As we know, derivative is obviously it is it's derived from an underlying asset, राइट। सो बी इट फ्यूचर्स और बी इट ऑप्शन, उसका कोई एक अंडरलाइन एसेट होता है, उसी से हम डिराइव करते हैं। सो दैट बिकम्स योर डेरिवेटिव्स, बी इट ऑप्शंस और बी इट प्रीमियम, द बी इट फ्यूचर्स। सो व्हेन वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट इवन द प्राइसिंग, फ्यूचर प्राइसिंग हो या ऑप्शन प्राइसिंग, बोथ आर डिपेंडेंट ऑन योर अंडरलाइन प्राइस और योर अंडरलाइन एसेट। ऑप्शंस के लिए अंडरलाइन एसेट ऑब्वियसली हो जाएगा द वे फ्यूचर्स इज मूविंग, ऊपर नीचे हो रहा है तो मेरा ऑप्शन का प्राइस वैसे मूव करता है। अगर मेरा फ्यूचर प्राइस ऊपर मूव करता है तो आई कैन से दैट माय कॉल ऑप्शंस जो हैं वो मेरे साथ ऊपर ही मूव करेंगे। अगर फ्यूचर प्राइस नीचे जाता है तो मेरे पुट ऑप्शंस के प्राइसेस बढ़ेंगे। सो दैट इज हाउ अंडरलाइन प्राइस इज एन इंपॉर्टेंट पैरामीटर दैट डिटरमिन्स योर ऑप्शन प्राइसिंग। नेक्स्ट, जैसे कि मैंने आपको अभी जस्ट आई हैव एक्सप्लेन स्ट्राइक प्राइस। फॉर एग्जाम्पल हाइपोथेटिकली मान लीजिए कि आज रिलायंस 2500 जा रहा है एंड यू आर होपिंग कि रिलायंस अगले 10-15 दिन में, हाइपोथेटिकल एग्जाम्पल 2600 अगर हो जाएगा, सो यू हैव टू सिलेक्ट कि मैं फ्यूचर में भी बाय कर सकती हूँ, मैं कैश में भी कर सकती हूँ, आई कैन डू इट इन ऑप्शंस, यू हैव ऑल दी पैरामीटर, यू हैव ऑल दी ऑप्शंस अवेलेबल विद यू ना। बट अगर मुझे ऑप्शंस में ही बाय करना है, आई कैन सिलेक्ट अ लॉट ऑफ स्ट्राइक प्राइसेस। Should I take 25-20 call option? Should I take 25-40, 25-60, 25-80, 26? What do I do it? How do I understand which option strike price should I buy, so that जब movement I 100 point की तेजी या फिर that rally comes in the particular stock, then my premium will move and I'll benefit out of it. So choosing that strike price is very important. Obviously एक चीज आपको याद रखना पड़ेगा, स्ट्राइक प्राइसेस जितने नजदीक होते हैं टू द ऑप्शन, सॉरी टू द फ्यूचर प्राइस, प्रीमियम्स उतने ही एक्सपेंसिव होते हैं फॉर द ऑप्शन। जितना दूर का आप स्ट्राइक प्राइस लेंगे, आपका प्रीमियम उतना ही चीप होगा। फॉर एग्जाम्पल, इफ टुडे रिलायंस इज कोटिंग एट 2500 एंड आई बाई 25-20 कॉल ऑप्शन, क्योंकि मुझे लग रहा है कि यहाँ से ऊपर जाएगा, so perhaps मुझे 25-20 कॉल ऑप्शन के लिए ज्यादा प्रीमियम देना पड़े, that price that I'm associating, that premium I have to pay to buy that strike price, that is going to be expensive for me. But if I choose to buy 2600 call option, वो मेरे लिए सस्ता रहेगा, cheap रहेगा. So therefore this is how a strike price also impacts your option pricing, or option premiums, we can say. The third kind of factor that affects the option pricing is your theta, or we can say simply time to expiration. In the sense, as you know, हर एक futures या options, they are contracts expire होते हैं. Expiry एक date पे आती है, तो वो date तक और कितने दिन मेरे बाकी हैं for that particular contract to expire. That is what we call as your time to expiration or your theta. Now it plays a very significant value. The reason being, मान लीजिए कि अगर I'm saying tomorrow is supposedly to be my expiry, hypothetical example है, अगर कल ही मुझे expiry है और आज मैं सोच रही हूँ कि रिलायंस 100 पॉइंट यहाँ से मूव कर जाएगा, कर भी सकता है, नहीं भी कर सकता है. अगर कर गया तो इट इज गुड इनफ. आई कैन बाय 2600 कॉल ऑप्शन एंड कल तक मैं वेट करूंगी 100 पॉइंट मूव आ गई तो आई वुड बेनिफिट आउट ऑफ इट. बट इन केस नहीं होता है, रिलायंस 25 पॉइंट ही चल पड़ा या फिर 50 पॉइंट ही चल पड़ा, नॉट द एंटायर 100 पॉइंट्स ऑफ मूव. सो मैं जो 2600 call option that I would have bought because it is cheaper for me, I'll be losing out the entire premium because of the theta value. It decays. Your premiums, your pricing decays as you get closer to the expiry. This is a reason why choosing a strike price with considering how many days you are left till until the expiry, very important to understand and choose that perfect strike price. Understand कि आपको कितना लग रहा है स्टॉक मूव करेगा, and then how many days do I have with me जब तक expiry ना आ रही है. The more days that you have, आपको obviously premiums थोड़ा ज्यादा होता है. जैसे जैसे expiry नजदीक आती है आपकी premiums कम होते जाते हैं. Right, so your next factor that affects your option premium is something called volatility. Volatility is very important. In simple terms, volatility means understanding how uncertain your stock movement can be. That's as simply put as कितना ऊपर नीचे हो सकता है मेरा स्टॉक, मेरा ऑप्शन प्राइसिंग. दैट इज व्हाट डिटरमाइंस योर वॉलिटिलिटी. अगर वॉलिटिलिटी कम है, इफ इट इज लाइक लेस वी से, इसका मतलब कि आपके प्रीमियम्स ऊपर नीचे बहुत ज्यादा होगा नहीं, एंड परहैप्स आपने जो व्यू रखा है उसके अनुसार ही योर स्टॉक विल मूव. बट अगर बहुत हाई वॉलिटिलिटी है मार्केट में, तो इन दैट केस व्हाट विल हैपन इज कि आपका प्रीमियम जो है बहुत ऊपर नीचे करेगा एंड प्रोबेबली आपको तंग भी कर सकता है, because you would panic instantly seeing what is happening. मैं अभी 10 रुपए में I have bought this option price and suddenly I can see वो 8 हो रहा है, 12 हो रहा है, 13 हो रहा है, फिर से 6 हो रहा है. So it will give you that sense of panic. So that's the reason why volatility is a very, very important parameter. The last two factors that we have plays the perhaps the least important role in identifying your option pricing, which is your dividend and interest rates. Interest rates currently obviously expensive होते हैं. So in that case, how your option pricing will move, whether it is cheaper to buy, whether it is expensive to buy. If your interest rate is rising, obviously it means that what will happen is that people will have a defined amount of money with themselves to buy. So option premiums actually become cheaper because in that case everybody would be willing to buy something that's very cheap. So बहुत लोग options में घुसना चालू कर देंगे. So that's ideally the most the least actually, sorry, the least impacting of parameters of all these parameters or factors that we can see in option pricing. So very important are the first four that we have covered: your underlying price, your stock price, your theta, or also known as your time to expiration, volatility. Remaining dividend interest rates are primarily just to understand where your premiums can be, or to understand a little more on the Greeks, which is a vast course. Greeks हम बहुत बाद में we'll cover. So एक बार हम इस चार में से सबसे इंटरेस्टिंग और सबसे डिफिकल्ट जो है जानने के लिए, दैट इज योर वॉलिटिलिटी. वील अंडरस्टैंड वॉलिटिलिटी थोड़ा और डिटेल्स में, क्योंकि वॉलिटिलिटी में भी ऑल्सो यू वुड कम अक्रॉस jargons such as IV, which is known as your intrinsic value, which is known as your implied volatility. So there's a lot of confusion that happens when you be dealing with such jargons. So let us understand volatility in details, right? Moving on to the next slide. So the next slide will show you what your IV is. Just as I hope it is changing. Yeah, right. So few terminologies that is important for you to understand when you're dealing with option pricing, options premium. One is your IV, intrinsic value. It is also known as your implied volatility, which we'll consider or we'll understand in the next session. What is intrinsic value? हर एक जो हमने डिसाइड किया है, हमने जो अभी समझा है स्ट्राइक प्राइस क्या होती है, एक ऑप्शन में यू हैव डिफरेंट कॉन्ट्रैक्ट्स, प्री डिटरमिन्ड प्राइस लेवल्स, व्हिच इज नोन एज द स्ट्राइक प्राइस. सो स्पॉट प्राइस या फिर कैश में क्या प्राइस चल रहा है एंड द स्ट्राइक प्राइस दैट आई एम चूजिंग, दोनों का डिफरेंस जो होता है दैट इज नोन एज योर इंट्रिंसिक वैल्यू. इंट्रिंसिक वैल्यू सिर्फ और सिर्फ इन द मनी ऑप्शंस में ही आते हैं. अभी इन द मनी क्या हो जाता है? इन द मनी होता है, फॉर एग्जाम्पल इफ आई से रिलायंस आज 2500 चल रहा है, राइट? लाइक आई एक्सप्लेन, हर एक ऑप्शंस में आपको कॉल ऑप्शन भी आएंगे, आपको पुट ऑप्शन भी आएंगे ना. 2500 स्ट्राइक विल ऑल्सो हैव अ कॉल एंड अ पुट ऑप्शन. उसके ऊपर नीचे भी हो सकते हैं, बहुत सारे और स्ट्राइक प्राइसेस हैं जिनके कॉल पुट ऑप्शंस दोनों हैं. How would you understand the moneyness of that particular strike? Whether it's in the money, at the money, out of the money, what is it exactly? All the call options of all the strike prices below 2500 becomes in the money. मेरा 2500 is my current spot price. उसके नीचे के जितने भी स्ट्राइक कॉन्ट्रैक्ट्स होंगे, 2400 कॉल ऑप्शन, 2420 कॉल ऑप्शन, 2440 एंड सो ऑन, 2300 कॉल ऑप्शन, एवरीथिंग दैट इज बिलो दैट प्राइस becomes in the money for me, but only for call options. Put options उसका उल्टा हो जाएगा. When I say उल्टा हो जाएगा, in the sense 2500 स्ट्राइक जो है आपका, उसके ऊपर जितने भी स्ट्राइक प्राइसेस आपको दिखेंगे, सच एज 2520, 2540, 2600, 2800, 3000, all the put options above that strike becomes in the money for me. So call or put options दोनों opposite. Understand how the in the money or the moneyness of the strike is moving. So here in this slide, you can see in the money, that is your ITM. In short, we call it ITM. It's an abbreviation. Only options that are in the money or ITM are said to have intrinsic value. How do you understand your ITM call option? If your strike price is less than your spot price, like I just gave you the example, 2500 के नीचे जितने भी call options हैं, वो सारे आपके in the money हो जाएंगे. How to understand if it is an in the money put option? If your strike price is more than your spot price, यानी कि 2500 के strike के ऊपर जितने भी strike prices हैं put के side में, वो मेरे in the money हो जाते हैं. So this is your this is understanding your moneyness of the option. So this is most important. In the money options के premium हमेशा ज़्यादा होते हैं than any other kind of moneyness of the options, be it ATM or OTM. In the money are always expensive in premium terms. Now, out of the money या OTM जो हम बोलते हैं उसको, how do you understand what is out of the money? जो हम समझे हैं in the money, उसका opposite अगर हम बिठाएंगे, so वो हमारा out of the money या OTM हो जाता है. For example, 2500 is my strike price, is my spot price. 2500 के जितने भी नीचे के put strike prices होते हैं, that becomes out of the money. और उसके जितने भी ऊपर के call options होते हैं, that becomes out of the money for me. Right? So OTM या out of the money options do not have intrinsic value. आपके OTM out of the money call option is when your strike price is more than your spot price. And your OTM or out of the money put option is when your strike price is less than your spot price. That is your OTM or out of the money put options. Out of the money put options जितना दूर होता है strike price से, the cheaper the premium is for that particular strike price. For example, if currently the stock is trading at 2500 and I strike is more than my spot price of 2500, right? 100 points is ज़्यादा है. So because it is out of the money, my option premium is going to be very cheap. But अगर मैं बोलूंगी कि I'll buy 2400 call option when my price is trading at 2500, तो 100 पॉइंट के नीचे की call में if I'm trading, so that becomes deep in the money for me. So उसके प्रीमियम बहुत ही ज्यादा होंगे than out of the money options. So similarly, this is how you identify आपको in the money लेना है, out of the money लेना है, क्यों लेना है out of the money. अगर बहुत ज्यादा दिन बचे हैं एक्सपायरी को, मुझे लग रहा है कि स्टॉक में बहुत ही तेजी की मूवमेंट आ सकती है, then that is the time when you can actually go for out of the money. I have a lot of days to cover. बट अगर मान लीजिए कि कल ही एक्सपायरी है या फिर आज के आज ही एक्सपायरी है एंड आई थिंक हार्डली 20 पॉइंट ही चलने वाला है, सो इफ आई टेक आउट ऑफ द मनी, सो प्रोबेबली आई विल एंड अप इन अ लॉस अगर नहीं चला स्टॉक, right? So in that case, sometimes in the money also helps, even though the premiums are expensive, But depending on how far you can see your stock price moving from your current price, you can decide whether you have to go for an in the money option or an out of the money option. Now, the third kind of category is your at the money or known as ATM. Now, option is said to be ATM when your strike price and your spot is absolutely same. If I say my strike, if I say the stock is quoting at 2500 right now, it means 2500 k call, 2500 k put options both become at the money for me. So this is what we mean by the moneyness of the options. In the money kya hota hai, out of the money kya hota hai, and then ATM kya hota hai. Understanding which option is going to be the money maker for me, uh, understanding how many days I have left until expiry, what is the volatility going on, how far or how further can I see the stock pricing moving, is all very important when you are dealing or trading with options. Right, so we have understood these very basic terminologies. Let us move on to the next slide where we'll understand something more on the volatility. So the next slide is going to tell you about implied volatilities and your historical volatilities, or VIX also is something that we say. VIX, India VIX kya hoti hai? Volatility index we call that. So these are the common terminologies that we are going to understand right now. Uh, like I've already explained to you, volatility is nothing but simply understanding how uncertain your stock movement can be. बहुत हाई वॉलिटिलिटी है तो माई स्टॉक प्राइसेस बहुत ऊपर नीचे हो सकते हैं. बहुत कम वॉलिटिलिटी है सो ऑब्वियसली इट मींस कि मेरे प्राइसेस ज्यादा मूव नहीं करेंगे. इट इज एक्चुअली अ वेरी डिसेंट सिनेरियो कि मेरा वॉलिटिलिटी नीचे है. इट मींस दैट आई हैव नथिंग टू फियर. मुझे डरने की कोई बात नहीं है बिकॉज मेरे प्राइसेस इतने फ्लक्चुएट नहीं करेंगे. So it's an ideal scenario for somebody to play, when your volatility is low. In other words, we call it as a fear index management system. That is what we call volatility or VIX as. It's just a fear management. बहुत आज मान लीजिए कि कल को बहुत कुछ बड़ा इवेंट होने वाला है एंड यू आर अनसर्टेन ऑफ वेयर द मार्केट विल गो. सो ऑब्वियसली इवेंट है, event as in like it could be global event, it could be monetary policies, it could be any sort of events that comes into the play where markets can be impacted. So when we're talking about such events, usually आपके volatility बहुत high shoot up हो जाता है because you are not sure of which way the markets can go, depending on how the events play out. Right, so मान लीजिए कि अगर कल को बहुत बड़ा इवेंट है एंड वॉलिटिलिटी एकदम ही ठंडा है, नेगेटिव है, कम है, लो है, एनीथिंग दैट यू कैन से. सो इट मीन्स दैट योर इवेंट नॉन इवेंट होने के चांसेस हैं. ज्यादा कुछ डर है ही नहीं मार्केट में. जिस ट्रेंड में पकड़ा रहा है वो ट्रेंड पे ही चलता रहेगा मार्केट. So that is how you can understand what volatility, how it helps you. बहुत high volatility है, so obviously your premiums of the option is going to be very expensive. अगर volatility बहुत ही लो है तो आपके ऑप्शन प्रीमियम बहुत ही सस्ती मिलती है, बहुत चीप होता है. So what happens is that starting of the series or starting of an expiry when we play, there are other parameters that come into the picture. हम option price, हम option premium को buy करेंगे, sell करेंगे. We understand there are a lot of other factors which we'll cover later perhaps in the webinar to understand. When you're buying or selling the option premium, you would also look at volatility as an important parameter. अगर मान लीजिए कि volatility एकदम कम है and I want to sell the option premium, so वो आपको उल्टा पड़ सकता है. The reason being is because कल को अगर volatility बढ़ रहा है, आपने अगर sell किया भी हो options premium को, वो कम होने की जगह वो बढ़ते ही जाएगा, even though the stock is not moving anywhere. So this is how volatility can hurt your option premium. अब मान लीजिए कि कल को बहुत हाई वॉलिटिलिटी है और मैंने ऑप्शन बाई कर लिए. ऑब्वियसली व्हेन आई सेड वॉलिटिलिटी हाई है तो प्रीमियम्स भी एक्सपेंसिव है, तो मैंने बहुत ही ऊपर चढ़ के एक्सपेंसिव प्रीमियम में बाय तो कर लिया है, बट वॉलिटिलिटी कल के दिन में ड्रॉप हो गया. इवन दो द स्टॉक मूव्स इन द डायरेक्शन दैट आई वांटेड इट टू, but because I bought the premium, I bought the option premium when volatility was very high. I bought it at a very expensive premium. And कल को जब volatility shoot shoots down ho jata hai, in that case my premiums also fall instead of moving up like I would have wanted, even though the stock price is moving in the direction I wanted to move. So that's how volatility plays a very very crucial role. So obviously there are three kinds of volatility situated or associated with an option. One is your implied volatility, another is your historical volatility, and दोनों का बाप अगर मैं पकड़ूं तो वो होता है हमारा इंडिया विक्स. So India VIX is the master of my IVs and HVs that we say. So IVs, implied volatilities, HVs is your historical volatility. Relationship between India VIX and market. A lot of analysts have this misunderstanding that they are inversely proportional. It is never so. इंडिया विक्स नीचे गिरता है मार्केट को ऊपर जाना चाहिए, या फिर इंडिया विक्स ऊपर जाता है मार्केट नीचे आना चाहिए. दैट्स अ मिसअंडरस्टैंडिंग. It is actually not inversely proportional. It behaves that way most of the time, but you will have plenty instances where VIX भी नीचे आ रही VIX भी नीचे जाता है and your market is also falling along with the VIX, या VIX ऊपर जा रहा है and your market is also going up with the VIX. VIX is never to be associated कि अगर मेरा ऊपर नीचे हो रहा है, so my market should also move accordingly. It simply means it's your fear index management. That's all. बहुत high volatility है, even though my market is moving up, you should be aware, or you should be cautious rather, understanding that markets may actually move either way. VIX बढ़ रहा है, right? So there could be a lot of volatility that can come into the play. So this is how you have to understand on a daily basis how to associate VIX with the markets. Currently, we are seeing VIX is continuously maintaining a level below 13, we can say 13 and a half ke niche. Right. So in that case, obviously, because we've been tracking this on a daily basis, we can understand that it's a fine level, it's a fine range to be, for the markets to react into. But मान लीजिए कि आज के केस में अगर ये 13 से immediately 18 हो जाता है VIX, बहुत बढ़ गया. So in that case, I should be very cautious of the market, because it's not because कि market कल को move ऊपर हो रहा है and VIX भी 18 हो गया, then I would say कि अब तो ठुक जाना चाहिए market. It's not that way. I should just be cautious because my volatility index is giving me the reason to fear the markets right now. There could be any sort of severe rapid swing fluctuations coming in the market because of the VIX. So this is how you associate volatility. And based on your VIX, based on your volatility, your options premium also react accordingly, and likewise, whether they have to be expensive or whether they have to be cheaper to buy or sell. Right. So moving on to the next slide, let us understand your implied volatilities and your historical volatility. So next slide, you can see what is implied volatility. So implied volatility is your projected volatility. It tells you कि in future मेरा क्या रहने वाला है implied volatility. In historical volatility is nothing but how your historical volatility or your the past days, how my volatility has been all through the day. So both are different parameters to follow. I've already explained, when volatility is high, your call options are high, your put options are also high. When volatility is low, both are at a cheaper price and a premium. So I think this slide I've already explained. We'll just move to the next slide where I'm trying to explain what is your implied volatility and your historical volatility. So IVs that we see associated with an option price, option premium, it says if my IVs are very high, it means my implied volatility बहुत high hai, my option premium can be very expensive. Right. So it is just showing you a measure of projected volatility. It is dependent on how expensive your option premium are currently in the marketplace. It is projecting, it is helping you. My IVs of, for example, my stock is at 2500 and I say 2400 call option I'll take. So a 2400 call option becomes in the money for me because strike is lesser than my spot price. Ideally, my premium is already expensive because I'm choosing in the money call option. Upar se IVs, it is already also at a high place because my option premium is high. It is deep moneyness, it's deep in the money when I compare it with my strike price. My IVs also could be shooting up. My option premium or Bs are the expensive ho jayenge. So in that case, if I go for buying that 2400 call option, फिर तो थोड़ा पंगा हो जाएगा because I'll be paying a lot more. Sub everything is very high. My IVs are high. My moneyness of that strike price is also high. So that this is how your IVs help you to determine what your option pricing or option premium is. Historical volatility is nothing but all your past days. मतलब कल तक की जितनी है मेरी volatility कैसे move हुई है. So historical volatility gives you that measurement. Now, if I compare today's IV with yesterday's historical volatility, if it is higher than my historical volatility, it gives me the idea that my option premiums will expensive. It may move up. Now, if it is lower, if my current IB, you can say, is lower than my HVs or historical volatility, then I can say that perhaps it is cheaper, premium cheap hai, or I don't have to be much worried about it can move down also. In that case, I would understand कि मुझे वो ऑप्शन का वो ऑप्शन स्ट्राइक प्राइस का मुझे बाय करना चाहिए, सेल करना चाहिए. So obviously it's a little more in details which are we'll be glad to explain, but perhaps at a later webinar stage, because right now we are just trying to understand what these jargons usually mean. Not on a daily basis, you'll not get to understand or listen to the words where people use IVs and HVs. Ideally, I believe if you are well acquainted with VIX itself, India VIX itself, you would understand, you have the basic understanding of how your option premiums are supposed to move. Like I've said, your India VIX is just the master of your IVs and HVs. So this is all about volatility. Now, basic things that we have covered till now: your option price, which is known as your option premium, your strike prices, which are your predetermined level of contracts. You have call options and put options. You have various strike prices for those call and put options. Factors that affects or impacts your option pricing, such as your volatilities, your interest, your dividend, your underlying price, your theta or time to expiration, and so on. So these are the basic jargons that we have related to option pricing or premium as of now. Now let us look at some more other jargons which we use. It can be used with it can be associated with options also. It can be associated with futures also. अभी तक की हमने जो अभी तक पढ़ाई की है, that is only associated with your option pricing. Your next slide will tell you whether it is associated with your futures and options both. Right, so very important. You will have to analyze, you will have to track, and then only you can be able to help yourself monetize out of it. When you have put all these parameters into perspective, line by line, you'll get to understand. So moving on to the next slide, which is very interesting and very, very important to understand your jargons related to your futures, which is your open interest. Like, I hope the next slide has moved. You can see it. Understanding what is open interest. Very important parameter, very important jargon which we use on a daily basis. Open interest exactly क्या होता है? एक contract है. We already know when we are dealing either with options or futures, we are dealing with contracts. Contract एक डेट होता है. आज के कॉन्ट्रैक्ट के डेट में आई एम एंटरिंग, उसका एक एक्सपायरी डेट होता है. कॉन्ट्रैक्ट्स के डेडलाइंस होते हैं, कॉन्ट्रैक्ट एक्सपायर होता है. So when you and I, we enter into something in derivatives, it has to be in futures or options. We deal with something called contracts, and a contract usually combines itself to make into an open interest. Open interest is nothing but at the end of the day, the number of outstanding or open contracts. मतलब कि आज के डेट में मान लीजिए आप भी रिलायंस बाय कर रहे हो, मैं भी रिलायंस बाय कर रही हूँ, कोई रिलायंस सेल कर रहा है. इन द एंड सबके बाय सेल को मिला के, कॉन्ट्रैक्ट्स को मिला के कितना वो कैलकुलेट हो जाता है, एंड देन वी अंडरस्टैंड कि कितना ओपन इंटरेस्ट, कितने कॉन्ट्रैक्ट्स मेरे आउटस्टैंडिंग है और कितने कॉन्ट्रैक्ट्स मेरे ओपन है इवन एज ऑन डेट. That becomes an open interest for me. And it is important for you to understand how open interest is calculated. Not that you have to calculate on a daily basis, But let your concepts be clear, because we use open interest jargon, the word, on a daily basis. It is associated with your options, it is associated with your futures as well. You can see this slide. You can see on day one, A, a person A is buying one contract, and uske samne B as a person is selling one contract. So one buy and one sell contract. This becomes your one open interest. There's always one buy and one selling. So that becomes your one open interest. The next day, you can see there's another person C who's coming in with 4 fresh contracts buy करने के लिए, और D एक और है जो 4 contracts sell करने के लिए आ रहा है. So पहले दिन को ऑलरेडी मेरे पास एक ओपन इंटरेस्ट एक पड़ा है, ओपन है, बिकॉज ए और बी ने अपनी पोजीशन कुछ की नहीं है, ऐसे ओपन करके दे हैव गॉन होम. नेक्स्ट डे को ए और बी के साथ सी और डी भी जुड़ जाते हैं, 4 कॉन्ट्रैक्ट्स लेके आ जाते हैं. So what happens is that this also gets combined. So this will get added to my previous day's open interest. So I'll say कि next second day को my open interest has moved up, because पहले दिन में 2 लोग थे, अभी और 2 लोग जुड़ गए हैं, और सबके कॉन्ट्रैक्ट्स को मिला के किसने भी पोजीशन काटी नहीं है. इन द एंड ऑफ द डे ऑल हैव केप्ट देयर पोजीशंस ओपन, सो इट बिकम्स एन ओपन इंटरेस्ट फॉर मी. So open interest is ideally understanding how many contracts is left open. Why is it important? Why do I need to understand the amount of contracts that people have left open? The reason is because अगर आज मैं कोई ट्रेड ली हूँ and I have kept my position open, my contract is open, it will reflect in your open interest today. So you will understand कि अगर मेरे जैसे और भी 100 लोग अपने positions open करके गए हैं, it means कि next day को they are expecting stock price और move करेगा, right? So that's the reason why open interest is very important to understand. अगर open interest बढ़ रहा है for any stock, you would understand कि बहुत लोग, बहुत प्लेयर्स आ गए हैं मार्केट में उसी स्टॉक में, एंड सब अपना पोजीशन ओपन करके जा रहे हैं. मतलब कि दे आर एक्सपेक्टिंग द स्टॉक ट्रेंड टू कंटिन्यू, परहैप्स ऊपर नीचे जिस भी हिसाब से हो. सो दिस इज व्हाई ओपन इंटरेस्ट इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट. आजकल हमारे पास सॉफ्टवेयर होते हैं, NSC से हम डाउनलोड कर सकते हैं the भाव copies and everything, which automatically calculates everything for you. You don't have to sit and manually calculate कि कल मेरे पास 100 थे, आज 200 हो गए, तो कितना होना चाहिए. You don't have to do that calculation. So this is how open interest works. Now, moving on to the next slide, we'll try to decode what open interest is, what is the difference between open interest and volume, and how can you analyze something based on open interest. मैंने आपको बता तो दिया कि open interest है क्या, but open interest से हम क्या कर सकते हैं, let us understand that. But उसके पहले you have to be very clear about 2 things. Open interest and volume are not the same thing. Open interest denotes your number of contracts that you are holding, which is open with you. आप एक बाय करेंगे, एक सेल करेंगे, that becomes one contract, sorry, it becomes one open interest for you. वॉल्यूम में अगर आप एक बाय करोगे, एक सेल करोगे, तो आपका instead of being counted as one, आपका वॉल्यूम 2 काउंट हो जाता है. So this is the main difference between volume and open interest. So volume indicates the number of contracts that have been bought or sold, all put together. But open interest will only show you the contracts that are outstanding or kept open at the end of the day. they are the number of active contracts, कितने अभी भी open है, कितने active है, outstanding है, open है, all these words, important words. But volume is not telling you कि कितने open है. Volume will just give you कि आज इस stock में 10 लोगों ने buy sell किया है, तो in the end this is your number that volume has been traded. It will not tell you कि इतने लोगों ने open करके गए हैं अपने अपने positions, खुला है, बंद है. That you'll not get to understand through volumes. Open interest बढ़ सकता है, open interest decrease हो सकता है. Volume कभी decrease नहीं होता है. Volume में if you are buying something, you're selling something, it still gets counted. Buying one, selling one, it gets counted as 2. But अगर आज मैं open interest buy कर रही हूँ, in the end I'm selling it, I'm closing my contract, so it's not going to count as open for you. So that's the reason why in open interest, you can see a scenario where it is decreasing. Volume, you do not get that sort of a comparison. The only comparison in volumes that you can make is कि आज मेरा volume 100 है, कल 90 था, कल को और 120 हो सकता है. That sort of comparison you can make, but it will not tell you कि कितने open हैं या फिर कितने लोगों की positions open हैं. So this is the key importance and difference between open interest and volume. Very important to understand. Let us not confuse. Now moving on to the next slide, most important slide, it will tell you exactly open interest को हम जान तो गए, समझ तो गए jargon है क्या. Now how do we understand what exactly it is? So open interest ko we have to decode it. How do you decode it? It is usually summed with your price action and your volumes put together to understand. On a daily basis, a lot of us we use jargon such as निफ्टी में आज लॉन्ग बिल्टअप देखने को मिल रहा है, निफ्टी में आज शॉर्ट बिल्टअप हुआ है, लॉन्ग अनवाइंडिंग हुआ है या लॉन्ग क्लोजर हुआ है या शॉर्ट कवरिंग हुई है. सो व्हाट एग्जैक्टली डज इट मीन? And what does it denote? Is it a positive sign? Is it a negative sign? Now, when I say open interest long built up, it means आज मेरा open interest बढ़ गया है in comparison to yesterday. So that is like my open interest is rising when I'm comparing it with yesterday. My price of that particular stock has also moved up. So दो चीज मेरे पास आज बढ़ गए हैं in comparison to yesterday. My price of the stock is moving up. कल के डेट में मेरे पास जितना ओपन इंटरेस्ट था, आज के डेट में उसी स्टॉक में और ओपन इंटरेस्ट बढ़ गया है. ना बोथ आर पॉजिटिव फॉर मी. थर्ड सिनेरियो, वॉल्यूम्स में मुझे दिख रहा है बढ़ते हुए. कल के डेट में इतना वॉल्यूम दिखा था, आज मुझे और ज्यादा वॉल्यूम दिख रहा है उसमें. So जब तीनों के पॉजिटिव हो गए, my open interest is positive for the day, my price is positive and my volume is also positive, we say that it's a long build up. It means that long की तरफ पोजीशंस बिल्ड हुए हैं. सो पीपल आर एक्चुअली एक्सपेक्टिंग कि उस स्ट्राइक में, सॉरी उस स्टॉक में, इंडेक्स में पोजीशंस सब लॉन्ग की तरफ लेके बढ़े हैं. सो दे आर एक्सपेक्टिंग दैट द ट्रेंड ऑफ दैट पर्टिकुलर स्टॉक विल मूव अप. सो लॉन्ग बिल्ट अप पोजीशन इज मोस्टली योर पॉजिटिव सिनेरियो. नाउ अंडरस्टैंडिंग उसका ऑपोजिट क्या होता है, उसका ऑपोजिट होता है शॉर्ट बिल्ट अप. व्हाट इज शॉर्ट बिल्ट अप? ओपन इंटरेस्ट आज मेरा कल मान लीजिए 100 था, आज बढ़ गया है, बट प्राइस नीचे आ गई है. प्राइस ऊपर जाने की जगह नीचे आ गई है, वॉल्यूम्स भी बढ़ रहे हैं. सो दिस इज अ केस वेयर पीपल आर सेलिंग और शॉर्टिंग, फ्रेश शॉर्ट करके जा रहे हैं because they are expecting that the stock will fall. So it's a short build up for me. The third kind of scenario is your short covering, unwinding, shedding, you can say. This is the case where open interest decrease हो रहा है. बहुत मान लीजिए कि मेरे बहुत सारे शॉर्ट्स थे एक कॉन्ट्रैक्ट में, एक स्टॉक में, एंड सडनली प्राइस बढ़ गया है. सो ऑब्वियसली आई बी इन लॉस बिकॉज मैं तो शॉर्ट करके गई थी, बट आज प्राइस बढ़ गया है. सो व्हाट आई शुड डू, मैं अपनी ओपन इंटरेस्ट की पोजीशन में काट लेती हूँ, मैं कॉन्ट्रैक्ट ही काट लेती हूँ. लेट मी नॉट डील विद दैट. सो द मोमेंट आई स्टार्ट unwinding or shedding that open interest, I close my contract because price is moving up, I'm in loss. So this is a case of your short covering. Shorts cover हो रहे हैं, shorts squeeze हो गए हैं उसमें एकदम से, and ऊपर price बढ़ते जा रहा है. Your last phase is known as your long closures, or you can also call it as long unwinding. What is long unwinding? A case where stock prices are falling, my volumes are also low, and people are exiting the position. So that also is coming down. So this is a case of long unwinding. So we have four kind of scenarios: long built up, short built up, which alone is sufficient enough to tell you what it denotes. Long built up is a case where you're expecting the stock to move up. Short built up is where you're expecting the stock to come down. Short covering and long unwinding are not final stages. They are in fact quite risky stages. So final stages आपके long और short built up ही बनते हैं. So understanding where you can see a stock creating a long built up kind of a position or a short built up kind of a position, आप उस अनुसार you can make you can prepare your trades. You can take a buying position or a selling position in that particular stock. So this is where we associate ourselves on a daily basis. We keep on using a lot of jargons: long built up, short built up, all these things. So this is what it actually means and the impact that it has on the stock. Right. So I think we've covered most of the important jargons. Only one more jargon left, which is in your next slide. It is called your put call ratio. In short, we use it as an abbreviation. It is called PCR. बहुत बार हम सुनते रहते हैं पीसीआर, पीपल से कि आज निफ्टी का पीसीआर 1 हो गया है, बैंक निफ्टी का पीसीआर 1.2 हो गया है. सो व्हाट एग्जैक्टली इट मींस? इट मींस कि जितने भी मेरे ऑप्शंस हैं, सारे के सारे ऑप्शन, सारे स्ट्राइक प्राइसेस, कॉल ऑप्शंस, पुट ऑप्शंस, इन द मनी, आउट ऑफ द मनी, एट द मनी, सबको मैंने कंबाइन कर लिया है. माय जितने भी मेरे पुट ऑप्शंस दिख रहे हैं और जितने भी मेरे कॉल ऑप्शंस दिख रहे हैं, आई जस्ट डिवाइड इट. द डिनोमिनेटर, the formula speaks for itself. PCR is equal to all your put options divided by all your call options. So this is known as a PCR. अगर PCR बहुत ऊपर बढ़ता है, 1.2 हो जाता है, we say कि put options में ज्यादा positions बन रही हैं, obviously because it is a numerator. अगर PCR आपका नीचे गिरते हुए नजर आ रही है, you can say कि आज PCR कल 1 था, आज 0.9 हो गया है. What does it mean? Obviously, mathematically, logically, you can understand if my denominator is going to get higher or heavier than my numerator, the ratio falls. So this is how it. So it means that calls में position ज़्यादा बन रही है. अभी writing की तरफ हो रहा है या buying की तरफ हो रहा है, that we'll understand at a later stage. So this is just understanding what the overall PCR is all about, like what you understand or what you associate yourself with. Obviously, there are different ways and parameters of understanding PCR, upar niche, how to analyze that, but we'll get to those parameters sometime later in the, later in the webinars. Right. So I suppose this is it for today. It's just very simple jargons. I hope you have understood it, and we'll be open for question and answer. If you have any, I'll be happy to take them all.
Thank you very much, Soni. It was a nice and very wonderful session. So our viewers have asked some questions, so I will take it one by one. So Mr. Tala has asked how we can understand where options writing is happening by using IV.
So what happens is that IV is understanding, only intrinsic value. Sorry, IV is when you're saying intrinsic value is what I'm assuming, or implied volatility. What happens is only in the money options will have your intrinsic values. Now, whether they are writing or whether they are buying, it is a very detailed analysis for you. आपको you have to understand the FI's positions on a daily basis. You have to understand all these strike prices में कितना मेरा open interest daily बढ़ते जा रहा है, to understand कि वहां पे मेरा writing हो रहा है कि selling हो रहा है, sorry, writing हो रहा है कि buying हो रहा है. And with IVs what happens is that जितना IV, जितना intrinsic value मेरा high होता है for that particular in the money option. So for example, I'll explain it to you. If 2500 is my current spot price and 2400 is my in the money call option, which will ideally have my intrinsic value. Now if I have to divide it, 2400 and 2500 ka difference hona chahiye 100, right? But let's say 2400 ki call option is quoting at let's 120 rupees or 130 rupees. Ideally होना तो चाहिए 100 रुपए, but price दिखा रहा है या फिर premium दिखा रहा है 120. So what it shows is that the stock can actually fall down because it will settle itself in that 100 point ke range mein. Understanding whether it has been written or buying, you'll have to understand your open interest position for that particular strike on a daily basis. You have to analyze that with your FI's position also on a daily basis. FI's may overall, FI's, DI's, clients and pros may ideally overall index options या stock options में buying है कि selling है. So you have to combine a lot of parameters together to understand कि कितना buying or selling हो रहा है. So it just based on an IV, you'll not be able to understand whether it's a writing or a buying position.
Okay, yeah. So our another one of the active viewers, Mr. Purvesh, has asked this question: which one is risky, futures or options?
So futures is riskier because futures में आपको unlimited profit तो है ही, but unlimited risk भी है. Options में आपके scenario is divided. If you are an option buyer, you are paying the premium. आप जितना प्रीमियम पे करते हैं आपका रिस्क वहीं तक ही लिमिटेड है. बट इफ यू आर एन ऑप्शन सेलर तो आपका फ्यूचर्स जैसे रिस्क बन जाएगा, बिकॉज अल्टीमेटली यू आर ओपन टू अनलिमिटेड लॉसेस. So it depends on your risk appetite. A lot of people can comfortable with writing and directly dealing with futures also. but ideally option buying scenario is the safer only because आपके वहाँ पे risk is limited. Obviously you'll also have to understand कि if you're if you, even though your risk is limited, there are a lot of chances कि अगर stock move भी नहीं कर रहा है in that particular direction, तो the options buying that you've paid that premium वो zero होने के भी chances हैं. So depends exactly on how much risk appetite you can take, but option buying is obviously a safer practice than your futures, directly dealing in futures, or writing in options. Irrespective of both, I think you should always have a stop loss maintained for you, a position depending on your risk appetite, till until how long you can control, or you can digest your losses. So stop losses has to be maintained in both cases, irrespective of the position.
Okay. So, since we have time limit, I'll go with couple of more questions only. We'll not be able to take all the questions in one go. So, how to use option chains?
So option chain, like I've said, it is a combination of all your call options and put options. All your strike prices will have call options and put options, and uske andar you will have open interest. On a daily basis, you will have to analyze कि open interest मेरा उस particular strike में बढ़ रहा है कि कम हो रहा है. Ideally हम क्या करते हैं कि अगर call options में I see in the option chain में call options बहुत ज़्यादा open interest बढ़ रहा है, it means कि वहाँ पे resistance form हो रहा है. पुट ऑप्शन के साइड में अगर मैं मुझे बहुत ज्यादा ओपन इंटरेस्ट दिख रहा है, सो इन दैट केस आई से कि वो मेरा सपोर्ट बनता है. So option chain would be one of the parameters which we'll explain to you in a future webinar exactly how to analyze and decode the market trend based on option chain. Right. So that I think we'll keep it up for like a later advanced session of our webinars.
Okay, thank you very much, Sony, for taking out time for today's session and sharing some very important insight on future and options for our viewers. And viewers, thank you for joining us today in our live session. And please do subscribe our YouTube channel in of Get blinkX so you don't miss any market updates. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Abhishek. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Thank you so much. Namaste.